Thanks, Roger. I've got to start with a quote. I don't know why I got to start with a quote, but just, I guess, how things are supposed to do these things, even for Larry. And it's a quote from an Irish guy, and I don't know why I got into that, but that's just how I roll. It's from James Joyce. Maybe not the guy you immediately associate with Larry Kasperek, but it's appropriate nonetheless. And the quote, I think, is about Joyce's lifetime battle with the powers in Ireland. And Joyce said, I will not serve that in which I no longer believe, whether it calls itself my home, my fatherland, or my church. I will try to express myself, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use: silence, exile, and cunning. Now, silence, exile, and cunning. A lot of us lead that way. Those are weapons Joyce used, and those are weapons a lot of us use. Larry has fought his battle on behalf of his clients for over 30 years, probably longer than Joyce. And Larry has used in his battle the weapons he has. And they are most decidedly not silence, exile, and cunning. In fact, they're probably like the opposite. Noise, immersion, and direct honesty. Now, Larry's getting this award this year because of his work in a case, People v. Gaydon, which is like a miniature or version or microcosm of Larry's career as a whole. And I'd like to just spend a moment talking about Gaydon, not as a legal case, but first, as a legal case, I think it's a huge case. It's a Fourth Department case, and it stands for the proposition, stateside, Fourth Department, controlling law, it doesn't matter what the individual prosecutor knows in terms of Brady material. He's chargeable with what the police knows and the other members of his office know. So it is a big, big case. It deserves a place in your trial folder, like, you know, along with the old napkins you might have or a little note you have. Stick that case in because it's big in that regard. But let's look at Gaydon just for a moment, not as a legal case study, but as a psychological case study, let's say, of Larry. Now, Gaydon involved a murder, shooting at White Square. Dubious direct evidence, no hard forensics, a ton of third-party sort of statements of admissions, he said this, he said that, by some very unsavory witnesses. It was a tribal case, very tribal, and for Larry Kasperek, that means it's winnable. Someone must make a distinction. He doesn't. So he goes to work. He files his demands, his discovery demands, his Brady demands, and they are, as usual, ignored. And in fact, it's kind of a word. It's sort of like dismissed by the prosecution as like weird things, gibberish, written in wingding bombs or something. It's like, they don't even acknowledge your file. All this is Larry doing his thing. Totally ignored. And he keeps filing them. And trial starts. And it is a courtroom where the victim was well represented. Gaydon's family was well represented, and the courtroom was packed, oppressive security, horrible, toxic atmosphere. And then, you know, right before trial, I don't know if you guys have this phenomenon, but a district attorney who has ignored you for like a year won't answer, won't respond to your phone calls, won't respond to your letters. All of a sudden, things start popping up, and your everyday deliveries are coming to your office with material things, and that you get overwhelmed with like stuff that you kind of like wanted to know months ago. So Larry like responds to that with his demand. He wants more information. Who are these people? What's going on? What, you know? And I ignore it again. And then the same district attorney, you know, it's not just ignored. It's like in front of the judge, the prosecutor will say, "Judge, he's accusing me. He's accusing me of withholding information. I don't have it. Here's my file. You see, it's empty. I'm beginning to resent Mr. Kasperek. He's accusing me of withholding information." And Larry keeps filing the demands. Same thing. I resent it. I don't have it. And the judge keeps saying, "Well, if he doesn't have it, then give it over, Mr. Kasperek." Now, trial comes in a toxic atmosphere. Things start popping up during trial again. Larry keeps going. "I don't have this. I need this. I need this information." Judge, DA whines about Larry, like besmirching his reputation by saying he's withholding things. Judge tells Larry to stop it. Larry doesn't stop it. Now, there's, I don't have, he's a professor at Georgetown. Like a lot of debates in law school about how like you should teach theoretical things or like practical things, or like whether law schools should, maybe the last 2 years should be more practically oriented. I was thinking about in criminal law, you know, if they did that, in our last year was like trade school or something, they'd have classes on like, you know, how to weasel an adjournment, like a number of practical skills. But there would also be a course called How to Get Yelled At by a Judge. Now, if they had this course, I would tell you, there's some debates about who's the best cross-examiner, who's the best opener, best summer-upper. If you have a skill set of how to get yelled at by a judge, Larry Kasperek is the best, bar none, nationally. And he doesn't do it. I mean, it's like a Zen master. It's like most people think. Well, actually, I'll give you a little story. Once we have a firm. In our firm, all of us are criminal lawyers, and it's like the public defender's office that we kind of cover for each other at things. And there's one time Larry, I think one of his family, there was a medical emergency with one of his family, he couldn't actually make it that day. He called in, and he had a court date. So, you know, Don and I were in court. We had to like cover for him. And on like Larry's Google calendar thing was like, you know, you had like, at 11 o'clock when a judge acts for arraignment or something, it was like, you know, 11 o'clock, Judge Y, getting yelled at. So Don and I go there and to get cover for Larry, and we get there, and where's Larry? The judge is like, where's Larry? Can't get anybody, a legitimate medical thing or something with his family, and the judge's like, okay, I'm gonna yell at you two. And then the judge starts yelling at us, and Don goes into his like thing, which is like, you know, completely internalizes it and just glowers and like gets more and more angry. And I like go into my thing, which is like I retreat into this interior safe place. I'm like nodding to the judge, draining my face of all expressive ability, pretending as though I do care, and I'm not insolent, and just waiting, and then like sort of converting what the judge is saying into the, I don't know if you remember those Charlie Brown cartoons, wah, 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 just letting that cascade over me, and so when we come back and we realize, you know, that was really a disservice, because what Larry would do was like he would use that to advance his case. It's like he's a contrite, he would at the moment engage a judge at other moments, and then jab back at other moments, and would advance his case. And all we were doing is like, you know, Don and I were like adopting our like middle school persona, getting yelled at by the vice principal. But geez, you know, if only we were like Larry. But back to Gaydon. Things start to unravel with Gaydon, and he's convicted. And then Larry just, he's just devastated by it. But he still keeps thinking about it and working on it. And he finds out really by randomness that one of the witnesses that Larry testified against Larry's client was like working off a deal with the feds. And this witness, it starts to turn out this witness is actually not only doing that, which the DA knew about, well, or the district attorney's office knew about, but was also a paid informant by RPD. And that was known to members of, certain members of the cops, and certainly to members of the district attorney's office. So Larry finds out, brings it up at sentencing, and his client gets an maximum. And district attorney, or the DA at the sentencing is quoted in the paper. Now, usually at sentencing, on homicides, almost, I think it's all homicides in our county, the district attorney will say, this is the most heinous crime of all time, and the defense cop. And that's, that's just their stock thing with the paper. In this case, I knew there was hope for this case, because in the newspaper, the prosecutor's quoted as saying, the defense attorney has been talking about this, complaining about this the entire trial. There's ample evidence. It's like, it's about Larry. It's not about Blake, So then Larry has to bring, Larry doesn't have to. He gets, at that point, he's done. He's put in his more than most anyone could put into a case. He doesn't stop. He brings a 440 on newly discovered evidence. He pries open that box, brings a motion that requires him to go talk to witnesses, all of whom are in various prisons across New York State. So he takes that glorious tour of New York, going to Fishkill, and Greenhaven, and Malone, and eating in the various cheap diners right next to these facilities, and getting the disclosures from these witnesses. And files a 440 motion. And gets a hearing, which requires him to actually do a 440 hearing. I don't know, the appellate attorneys and trial attorneys, 440 hearings are torture, because they're not only like factual, they're factual, but they're not factual in the sense that a trial is factual, where you get a little elbow room in a trial. You can like strut your stuff a little, so you get flexibility. 440 here, every time you do that, the judge yells at you because you're outside of the boundaries of 440, and their appellate rules that govern it, and just utter pain. So he's got to prepare for that. And of course his witnesses are changing, the stories from the prisons, everyone's drama. He puts together a hearing, calls witnesses, does the hearing, and loses. And then, not only did he lose, the judge, Larry gets a voucher at the end of the hours he put into it, which were like, he put in a tiny fraction of the hours he put in. So he's like, well, Larry, obviously put the time in, but we can't pay this kind of money on it. This kind of thing. Cuts the voucher. So Larry then, of course, files a motion to appeal the Bell Division, and granted. And Bell Division then reverses the case, basically holds that the district attorney's conduct was illegal. There was private information he should have had, and his client gets into trial. And now it's about like 7 or 8 years into it. And DA's then quoted in the paper saying, oh, we're going to take this up to a higher court, the outrageous decision, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes to Larry. It basically gives Larry an offer of time served for his client. And then his client takes it, which I think is really some good lawyering. Because trial, he got a good shot, but his client is looking at sunshine if he takes a plea. And Larry counseled his client. His client said, I want out. I want my life. And Larry gave it to him. Now, that's a great case. Exceptional lawyering, perseverance, strength, and it's the way Larry tries a case. Now think about this. He's done doing it for 30 years. Just like unspooling that story. It's kind of, think about doing that again and again. That's the way he does his trials. To take a big piece out of him. And, how do you, we're talking about, everybody's talking about how do you represent those people? How do you do that? How do you keep going? How do you keep doing it? And it's certainly not ego. Despite his unassuming, self-effacing manner, some people have accused Larry of having a healthy ego. Actually, they're totally wrong. Much like conventional wisdom can do. Larry is really one. Is a lawyer. He's probably the least ego-driven lawyer I know. It's not ego. That fuel burned out long ago. It's what is it certainly is that sort of deep sympathy for the powerless in our community. Those without a voice, those wheeled into a courtroom to assume their anointed role in a trial. A show trial sometimes. But it's not just that either. About a month ago was the 50th anniversary of Gideon and the Criminal Justice Act in the federal system. And Reuben Kahn, the federal defender in San Diego, and you cannot talk about Larry without talking about San Diego at some point, was quoted saying, you can have all the commitment to social justice, but if you don't enjoy a fight, you can't take a punch, you won't last. Larry enjoys a fight, and boy, he can take a punch. I gotta say, just anecdotally, he was in court once a couple of years ago on a case involving a municipal situation where Don represented the mayor of the village and Larry someone, and Larry was describing the media, in the website media, as Lawrence Kasperek. The quote was, a tall, elegant gentleman. A tall, elegant-looking gentleman with gray hair and a gray beard and was wearing a dark gray suit. So that was printed, and Don, the co-defendant, was described basically as a balding, nondescript man. Looked like Willie Loman toting his briefcase. As you may imagine, at our firm, that generated a little bit of, we just sort of gave it to Larry both with bludgeons, with poison and scalpels, just relentlessly, and he takes it. He does it. He can take the joys of fight. But how does he do it? How does he keep trying cases the way he does? And I think it's because he's at root generous. I mean, he really is the most generous person I know. With his time, his attention, his emotions, and he pays a huge price for litigating the way he does. He knows it, and he's willing to pay it. Roger spoke a few years ago about Jeff Jacobs and how Jeff had tried, I think, 100 felony cases. Roger was like gobsmacked by that, saying, I can't comprehend that. It's like each felony trial takes a piece out of it. And it just takes something out of it. And it's so true. And you try a case like Larry, it takes a lot out of it. To use another artist, Jay's on it, is Janis Joplin. Just take another piece of my heart, baby. And Larry, if we could see Larry's heart, I think it'd be a marvel. It'd be missing a million little pieces, big pieces. It would be scarred, pockmarked, but it would be pumping mercy and strength. It'd be a marvel of engineering. And look, Larry and I also have a friend, a mutual friend, John Colbert. Now he's a real Joyce guy. He like teaches Joyce in Chicago. So he gave up law to become a literature professor. And I was talking to John, I tried to get him here, and he couldn't make it, but he was saying, hey, you gotta like remember Larry. The thing about Larry is, John and I have a number of mutual friends who died and got sick. And Larry's always there looking with the first and the most. And he said, make sure you put that out there. And I said, yeah, sure I will. And I have to say that, in closing, that we all should learn from him. We should be generous to each other. We should pay the cost. When we try occasions, we should pay those costs with everything we got. Even if our own weapons are silence, exile, coming, give it everything we got. Pay the cost. And with the solace of knowing that if we go down and get stricken and die, Larry will be there. The best. So will our survivors at our funeral. So I give this award with as much pleasure as I can get. I give it to my partner, my fellow traveler, my fellow Joyce scholar, the guy I know will always be there, and now my fellow Jaco winner, Larry Kasperek.
Thank you, Bill. Let me start up along these lines. I obviously worked with Jeff. He was a friend of mine. He was a colleague. And when I joined the office in '85 with Paul and Bill and a number of other people, he was senior to us. And he was, along with the other people back in that era, they were all very generous with their time, certainly, and with their knowledge. And along with the two chaps I just mentioned that I grew up with in the PD's office, they taught us how to be good lawyers. We came with the raw interest and abilities, perhaps, certainly Paul and Bill. But over the years, I really became to be quite honored to be considered one of their peers because they were senior to me. John Colbert was mentioned, certainly John. And I could not have landed at a better place. Jeff was everything that everybody's mentioned and everything that's been written. He was a scientist who was precise, fearless in a courtroom. But you could come back those days and everybody would pat you on the back, just as Abby said. And everybody would say it's okay. And everybody would help you and stay up late nights and work with you on the preparation. And when you came back, they all bowed down and said, we are not worthy, because if you won the case, you were the greatest, you were the brightest guy in the building that day. So to be honored in his name is really quite a little bit for me to take. But he was very human, and he had a lot of talents. He was a great cook. He loved wine. He loved his Knicks. He had only one flaw that I was aware of, and that is that he loved this Toyota Land Cruiser. Now, back in the day, that was the biggest SUV you could find without a Class C license. The problem was he drove it like a Ferrari. And as precise and courageous and fearless as he was in the courtroom, he drove like that. And I know because he drove me home a couple of times. And, you know, it was a life-changing event. Great guy, good friend of mine, terrific colleague, lousy driver. To the nominating committee, I want to, first of all, I greatly appreciate the nomination. I'm sure there were other candidates. Matt Lemke certainly is an able attorney. I'd like to consider him a strong colleague of mine. I realize that this is a perpetual award and that Jill and Bill and Ann Berger and Liz and Emily have been prior recipients, and I'm honored to stand in the same stead with them. I've always been a fan of certainly Jill and Bill's abilities. I know Ann a little, and I know Liz and Emily even less, but I'm certainly aware of their reputations. So it's quite an honor for me to be considered along those lines. And I realize that there will be other people after me beyond that. So, but I also understand that I've won the sympathy vote. Because after all, you know, I'm one of the 4 horsemen, one of the 4 dinosaurs, one of the 4 SOPs, depending on who's referencing us. And that Don and Bill, Don Thompson, Bill Easton, you just heard from, Brian Schifrin, are just dripping with awards. They have more plaques, more proclamations. They have original works of art named in their honor. They have gavels that are engraved and little statuettes of glass etched and big statuettes. Don Thompson has literally walked people wrongfully convicted out of prison. He's practically a god. Bill Easton was one of the Capitol defenders, and with a small cadre of people took apart the New York State Capitol statue. Okay? Brian Schifrin is a genius. He'll tell you that. He's argued cases at the Supreme Court. He constantly tells me I don't know enough things. I love it. So, you know, when I got the phone call from Roger indicating that I had received the award, I really was kind of, you know, taken aback. I didn't know what to say. I was, you know, very gracious of Roger call, and I appreciated it. And I'm sitting there, and Brian comes into my office and says, "Hey, I hear you're going to get an award." Now, emphasis on singular there. Okay? But, you know, and well, thanks very much. And, you know, and then he started telling me all about his awards. Not that I didn't know, because they're on the wall, on the shelf. And so, you know, these guys didn't know this. They don't know this. I have another award. I don't brag about it. I don't even tell them about it. This is the first time I'm ever going to tell anybody about it. So when, you know, when the glory of the world is raining down on my colleagues, I congratulate them. I go in my office, I shut the door, turn off the lights. I sit down at my desk. I open up the drawer, and I take out a little small piece of parchment. It's kind of faded. The edges are all charred, bent over at this point. I look at it. I pause. Because it was the perfect attendance award. Sister Benita's 3rd grade class. I've always kept it. Because right after that, my parents moved, and I started going to public schools. It was the 60s. I discovered girls. attendance was never on my mind again. As you all know, we have, in our profession, our practice of criminal law is a very jealous mistress. It demands our attention constantly. It robs us of weekends, stolen a few holidays from me, requires long days of work, sleepless nights on occasion, and has drained from me precious time over the years with my lovely wife, and cheated me of time with my children, Spencer being the only representative of the group. And, you know, you all have the same experience. And it's hard to admit this, but I love it. I'm sorry for the expense, but they have been kind enough to appreciate my love of it. And very often remind me that there are other things other than my cases, other than my clients. Abby said, you know, the cocktail question, the question we all get the question, you know, how do you do this? Why do you do that? Why did you ever want to be a criminal defense attorney? Well, you know, we all have our glib responses. And, you know, mine is, well, you meet the most interested people. Or, you know, too much Perry Mason. You know, that kind of gets you through the moment. But the truth is that it's wired into my DNA. I got hijacked by the orators of my time. I'm a baby of the 60s. And those orators said, when I was, you know, young and impressionable, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I took up that challenge. And the next great orator said, you know, I have a dream that my sons will be challenged, will be considered not by the nature of the color of their skin, but the content of their character. But the one that really got me is one that Bobby Kennedy gave. You know, Bobby gave some great speeches and ended his life way too short. But this one really hit me, and still does. It says, each time a man stands for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. Those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. You know, I took all of that in. And I think that I was honored to stand up on behalf of my clients. And you are too. You know, that's why you're here. And Jim Hinman, who's not here, he's about to stand up. He's about to stand up for a guy by the name of Thomas Johnson. I've been there. It's lonely. You know, but he's going to stand up. You know, Mark Hoskins is here. He's going to stand up for a guy by the name of Mahmoud El-Keith, I think. You know, accused of being the Al-Qaeda recruiter. That's going to be a lonely experience. He's going to stand up. We don't do this because we condone the alleged acts of our clients. We do this because we are the constitutional conscience of the due process system. Because we demand that each of those individuals be treated individually, that their liberty and their rights are honored. That constitutional compact that we have has value for even them or even me. And I recognize that we are the counterweight to overzealous prosecution, that we stand against overreaching governments, and that in the cases that I've just mentioned on behalf of the two chaps that I just mentioned, we often stand as a shield to mob mentality. God help us all, because we love it or we wouldn't be here. Jeff, my friend, stood for every one of these items that I've just mentioned. And it's humbling for me to have an award given to me in his name and in his honor. I'm not much for clubs, as you probably know. I'm not big on legal fraternities. But I'm happy to say that I am glad and proud to be a part, to be a soldier in the army or family of criminal defense attorneys. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And so, thank you for your recognition. Thank you very much for your kindness.